Hello and welcome to our millions of viewers here in Nigeria, the continent, and all around the world. This is the morning brief. Thank you indeed for joining us here on the program. As always, I am Kelly Egiga.
Wherever you're watching us from, we're live for you from our global headquarters here in Lagos. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bukola Koka.
Bukola, good to see you. Perhaps you're wondering where Jeff is. Well, he joins us live from the nation's capital. We'll see how we can connect with him very briefly. He's in the Abuja studios. But let's walk you through what we're tracking for you this morning. Yesterday, it was all over the news. The House of Reps summoning the IGP to present the fake DG, some would say the phantom DG. Some have called him, actually asking the IGP to present him for questioning or for probing. So that's the latest tweets we're hearing as regards that particular story. Whether or not Prince Adeni will be presented to the House of Reps, we'll find out perhaps in the coming hours. That's the latest tweets. It's again still difficult to perhaps digest how we're still referring to this man as fake, because yesterday as well the accountant general was also summoned, and he made a case for his ministry. I mean, he said that Adeyemi presented fake letters, and so when they saw those letters, they felt, you know what, it looked real to them. And I'm just wondering, perhaps, is there no way to determine whether a letter is fake or original, such that those offices were, well, maybe manipulated or deceived or cajoled, so all of a sudden the accountant general realizes that the letters that were presented were fake. So that's the latest twist. It's interesting to see what will play out in the coming hours if the IGP will indeed present Prince Adeni to the House of Reps so they can continue with their investigation. Remember that this matter as well is at the court, so it's interesting. The House of Reps carrying out their own investigation, at the court as well, there are litigations there, and then of course the ICPC is also probing this particular controversy or scandal as well. Bukola.
Yes, indeed. We did trail this particular subject at the beginning of the week yesterday on the program. We've seen a consistent dissociation by officials of the state government agencies of this particular DG. The head of the Civil Service of the Federation had, at the commencement of this probe by the House of Reps, disowned this agency, but acknowledged that indeed documents were presented for application for an office at the Secretariat, but because they didn't pass the scrutiny, the application was not granted. Yet, this agency found space for operations at the State Government Secretariat. 3 days ago, I believe on Friday, we did see also the Director General of the Budget Office, Tani Muturaki, also disowning this agency, saying that they didn't draw funds at all. We've now seen the Accountant General of the Federation also speak to these matters, saying that they did receive an application for this particular agency to get a code, but no transfers, no funds were made. But then I wonder if the right questions are being asked as this probe by the House of Reps continues. What was the timeline of these activities? Was it last year? Was it 2024? And if indeed these government officials are disowning this particular Director General of now what government would have us believe a fake agency, why was there no whistle blown? Why did the Office of the Civil Service not raise the alarm over the operations of an agency that didn't get requisite documentation to operate at the agency? If these findings were done by the Director General of the Budget Office, the Accountant General of the Federation, where if these findings they're telling us were made last year, why are we just hearing from them now when things have blown over? If the Accountant General of the Federation is having us know that the document from the State House, stating a request for the code to be opened for this fake agency was found last year. And why didn't the Office of the Accountant General raise the alarm to the State House that this documentation that we have seen, requesting a code is fake? Why are we just hearing about it now? We've seen this individual interact with members of the diplomatic community. We've seen him in pictures with state government officials. And so this probe, questions coming from this probe are still unsatisfactory as far as possible. And at the same time, the House of Reps must now summon officials of the state government that have been named in this particular scandal. Else, it will be the voice of the strong prevailing over the voice of the weak in this particular matter, because this individual has not shied away from giving an account of his own experience as far as his operations are concerned.
Absolutely.
Abuja is looking good on Jeffrey this morning as he finally joins us. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, Bukola. Hello, Kelly. Good morning and welcome to Abuja. Let me welcome you officially from the nation's capital. We are used to the nation's commercial capital, but this is the nation's administrative capital. And what you've been talking about shows a failure of internal mechanism, institutional mechanism in the administration of things. Because right now, everybody is lifting their hands, said, I did my part in ensuring that this guy did not get through with all the things that he claimed to have gotten through. But one thing is a fact. His budget found its way into the presidency budget. It's not just an MDA, the presidency. Item number 8 in that presidency budget is he found a way to have an office at the state secretariat, not at a mall, with staff working with him. He found a way to also go through a process of perhaps trying to start an account or open an account with the central bank. Initially, when Barananuga stated what this was about, he actually said the man opened an account, but no monies were released. And then we heard another thing from the accountant general. We're hearing all kinds of things. Now, this is where the problem lies. Nobody wants to take responsibility. Everybody's trying to dodge this. But somebody must go, and some persons must take the fall with this guy. It will be poor, both from the House of Representatives, absolutely poor from the ICPC, if Prince Adeyemi is the only one that takes the fall, because that is going to be acceptable by the Nigerian people. From the office of the Chief of Staff to the office of the Secretary General of the Federation to the head of service to members of the National Assembly to budget office, we must find a way. There is arguably, allegedly, some level of complicity somewhere. It's difficult not to believe that there's no complicity somewhere. So if this House of Reps wants to do a thorough job for Nigerians, it's either somebody wasn't smart enough or quick enough to identify to blow the whistle at when they should blow the whistle. Now that someone else has blown the whistle, everybody's raising their hand and said, okay, I saw it, but I didn't do this. It's not acceptable. Let's this not go the way of the NDDC probe. There are other probes we've had that have gone under the shelf. We've had all kinds of probes, even the humanitarian ministry, and now certain persons with that ministry are talking. We don't know how that ended with the EFCC. So if the administration and if government in general wants citizens to take them very seriously, after all of this ICPC probe as well as the House hearing, we must see other people join this guy in whatever punitive measure is being taken, either for negligence or for not blowing the whistle at the right time or for being even complicit in the first place. So all this I'm hearing, well, is within their right to state what they know and what they've done in terms of their own control system to ensure that it doesn't follow through. By the end of the day, it will be failure on government, failure on those who are probing, failure on those who are asking questions, and it will even be failure for us as journalists if we cannot, double down on the government to say, Prince Adeyemi did not act alone. Do you know what the presidency is? It's an institution. So for somebody to find his way into the institution, whether monies were passed or not, but somebody to go through the process he's gone through, the bribery case, all of that, the court will sort that. We'll leave the courts to sort out the things that the court will sort out. But it's impossible, near difficult, for anyone to convince rational, consensus Nigerians that this guy acted alone. Now, it's not acceptable. So we allow them to do their work. By the end of the day, this guy, who they have established from their own probe, looks like a fake, a fraud as alleged, must not go down alone. I think that's my 1 cent on this matter.
All right, Jeff. I mean, we totally agree with you here on this table. I've said before that the doors of government don't just open to anyone. Somebody from inside always gets to open the doors of government. And so it will be interesting to see how these investigations would go. The probe as well by the ICPC. We're waiting to see. 30 days. Remember, the president gave the ICPC 30 days. We have to count down and ensure that they know that we are watching and waiting to see that this particular report doesn't disappear in the pipelines. But Jeff and Bukola, that's not all we're tracking this morning. Sadly, in Anambra State, 2 days ago, there was a building collapse. 2 persons, we understand, have been confirmed dead. It's really very, very tragic to hear of these kind of stories where people have to lose their lives as a result of this. But this time it's even more tragic because the persons who lost their lives were students and who were living in a particular hostel. If my memory serves me right, I know how these hostel facilities can work, where you know, perhaps you know how students are. One person can invite a coursemate and all of that to come squat with him. Sometimes they are up to 3 or 4 in a room. So we don't know perhaps what could have played out. We're going to have that conversation here on the program this morning. But another building collapse, really very sad, in Anambra State. Bukola.
Well, we'll explore that more later on the program, and so we're just going to reserve our horses at this particular point in time. But speaking of building collapses, the Council for the Regulation of Engineering is also investigating the collapse of a portion of the Gombe State House of Assembly. So definitely, just to quickly add to that, there are more calls at this particular point in time for the regulation of development structures across the country, and not just in Anambra or Gombe, but in every part of the country. But another story that gets our attention, Kelly and Jeffrey, this morning is the federal government's calls for the protection of more Nigerians in South Africa amid the ongoing xenophobic attacks. And it was interesting to see that interaction between Nigeria's minister and the South African minister yesterday. Just to quickly get to the story, the Minister of Foreign Affairs did point out that about 98 Nigerians alone have lost their lives in either mob attacks or hate attacks in 2022 alone. And the South African Foreign Minister also did assure that Nigerians who lost property in ongoing xenophobic attacks, if indeed there are documentations to prove them, that they would get their properties. But Kelly and Jeffrey, what I didn't note and what I sought desperately during that interaction was an apology from the South African government through its Minister of Foreign Affairs to Nigeria over the number of deaths that have been recorded so far, over the number of Nigerians and indeed other African nationals that have been persecuted, that have lost their properties, that have in broad daylight been challenged, been manhandled, been mistreated. There was no apology whatsoever. Now, if the management of migration is a government-to-government responsibility, is a shared responsibility as acknowledged by the South African Foreign Minister, what then is the responsibility of a nation that hosts other nationals, especially towards preventing such violence, preventing such degeneration of relations between nationals, to the extent that we see a persecution detention of other foreign nationals. We see a mishandling of other foreign nationals. We see them lose their properties in broad daylight. What are the internal mechanisms within that country to demand that irregular migrants leave the country? Why has that country left it to their citizens to go about intimidating other nationals? And so that interaction left more questions than answers. It showed indeed the state of affairs of South Africans, how they really do not care about what happens, and as a result, Nigerians must demand better compensation, and of course call the bluff of this particular country. Jeffrey. All right, we'll get to Jeffrey shortly. Let's take a moment now. When we return, it will be time to look at what the papers are saying this morning. Welcome back, and so let's get right into the papers this morning, and we're sport for choice. Of course, the papers are also leading with the probe by the House of Reps, amongst other stories. But let's bring in our guests this morning as we look into what the papers are saying. And joining us is the commissioning editor, The Conversation Africa, Mr. Wale Fatade, who joins us virtually this morning. Mr. Fatade, good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Bukola. Thank you. And Jeffrey has abandoned us in Lagos. Good morning, viewers.
I'm sure Jeffrey will be back soon. He's already laughing.
He's dining and whining with the big guys in Abuja. No problem.
He's going to have good time to respond to that.
I don't whine and dine. My job is to hold them accountable. We're just cordial, that's all.
All right, we'll find out about that, Jeffrey, when you return, because you're going to face a probe here as well.
Honestly, I'm the chair of that probe.
All right, so let's begin with the New Telegraph. PFIPC probe, reps direct IGP to produce fake DG in 48 hours. And there's just one rider here that tells an insight into, the slant of the New Telegraph's reporting. Signature on Adeyemi's appointment, not COS. Police. Then AGF Ogujimi alleges Adeyemi hijacked State House letter. What is your reasoning of the nature of the risk or the revelations that we're getting amid this House of Reps probe?
Thank you, Bukola. Wasn't it Shakespeare who wrote it, whether it's a poem or a play, comedy of errors? I think that's what we are having now. I remember I did say here last week that the investigation, how many bodies, how many agencies now are actually investigating this stuff? Now, constitutionally, the House of Reps, the Senate, they have the right oversight function, the full matter of public interest, blah, blah, blah. But then I'm beginning to get worried, and I think all of us Nigerians should be too. To what end will all this manner of probe lead to? That's the important thing. Now, saying that the police, are they still investigating? I thought it was the ICPC that was on it. And so I hope the police officer that said the signature on it was forged would actually give the court or whichever body asks for that evidence the findings, how they came to that conclusion that the signature was forged. None of us should assume anything now, and then none of us should discountenance anything. Anything is possible. When you are investigating, there must be open mind, ready to accept or to receive whatever your findings are. And I think there's a mismatch now. There's a mixture of many things. And too many cooks spoil the broth. I think we need to streamline the investigation. Each body, perhaps one body can allow one body to finish. But if it's actually a matter of law and order, it's actually a matter of illegality or legality, I think security agencies are best placed to investigate this. I remember the point I made last week is Steve Germain, the chief of staff, should step aside until this investigation is completed. The office is too big, it's too powerful not to interfere with any investigation. Thank you.
But are you confident that the House of Reps would someone, the chief of staff, who happens to be their former principal?
That would be a great news day, and I would love to be a National Assembly correspondent of any media. When a committee of House of Reps will summon a former House Speaker, a former minority leader, a former majority leader. The answer, as the English will say, is blowing in the wind. I don't see that. And if they now invite him, let it be a public hearing, not a closed door hearing. Then maybe Nigeria is changing for the better.
Well, Mr. Saturday, I mean, it's a hearing that many Nigerians will really want to see if that would happen at all. Other papers as well are leading with this national embarrassment and scandal that has refused to go away. But let's take a look at perhaps other papers this morning and see if we can figure out one or two other stories. Vanguard also leads with that story, but we'll just snub it for a moment and take a look at something else that concerns Nigeria and Nigerians. The bottom of that paper leads with something else: xenophobia. Tinubu snubs Ramaphosa's envoy as FG demands early warning pact ratification. That's it's a page 8 read. We are back and again with this. Both ministers of foreign affairs for Nigeria and SA met yesterday. Bianco Jugu and and that of the South African delegation as well. Beyond the talking tough, Mr. Saturday, I wonder what you think perhaps the government should be doing differently to send a clear message that the life of the average Nigerian matters.
I think, first of all, when the news broke yesterday that our president snubbed the envoy of Cyril Ramaphosa, I was actually jubilating and jumping up from joy. But my joy was short-lived, because not too long after, news broke again. It's a running story that the president has actually agreed to meet with the envoy, and I was sad inwardly. But later, when it turned out that it was the minister, I said, okay, that's better at least. But then when we are fighting, or when even in the state of war, Iran and US, for instance, now you still leave channels open for talking, for negotiation, and I think that's good. By the way, I'm not sure it was our Minister of Foreign Affairs that actually met the minister. I think it was our Minister of State, was the minister too, the ambassador who was just sworn about a few months ago. I think that's okay. Beyond, what should our government be doing? You have summoned the ambassador here. You have given a letter of protest in South Africa. You have our vice president at the ECOWAS regional meeting last week raised this issue with other leaders there, and I think with the Ghanaian counterpart, and they actually said they are petitioning AU. Save of calling or recalling an ambassador or high commissioner now as it were from South Africa. I'm not sure there's any other thing we can do now. But it's okay, it's crucial and germane that the Nigerian government keep this issue on the front burner. We saw again last week how one of our citizens was killed in South Africa. Yeah, a very gory video that was online. And it was a fresh one, not the other ones. I think what we should go on with now, the Ugandan government, I saw that, I watched that, by what's the president there now, Yoweri Museveni, has asked his own citizens to compile the list of their goods and their properties that were looted or that were damaged for compensation. Ghana is doing that too. Now I hope we should ignore what Ramaphosa or any of his ministers said, that there will be no compensation. That's the next stage I think we should go on to. People who fled, leaving their properties, their hard-earned labor that they have worked for legitimately, not proceeds of crime, not proceeds of fraud, then they deserve compensation. And we should continue to watch that. And I think it will be very solid and very annoying for our president to sit in any place with the president of South Africa. Now, even at the international forum, if their chairs were put together, our protocol officials should insist that those chairs be separated. We should let South Africa know that the gloves are off. That as one musician sang, we know our friends and our enemies too will surely not forget. South Africa is not a friend of Nigeria now.
And if there was any evidence that pointed to that, it was the interaction that we saw play out yesterday. I was looking for at least an apology from the...
But they won't do that. And by the way, you remember that early warning system, sorry to barge in.
Yeah, go ahead.
That early warning system was drafted last year. It was not a new thing. And so if that thing had been ratified by the South African government, perhaps, who knows, this last crisis could have been averted. But they refuse to sign that, and they are still saying they are not signing that. Relationship should be mutual. If it's not beneficial, let each person go to his tent.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to other issues, but this is an ongoing conversation, and we demand, that Nigeria, as Kelly has said, sends a strong statement to South Africa over the conduct of its nationals and, the way that especially its government has handled these issues. Very quickly, let's explore the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, which is another very, very concerning matter. Oshun Guba, EU observers warn of security risks, says August 15 poll, official test for electoral institution ahead of 2027 general election, identifies 13 out of 30 local government areas as high risk due to politically motivated killings. And it goes on, but very quickly, Mr. Fatade, the Oshun Guba election, the stage looks more set for political violence based on what we have seen. I wonder if you're reasoning differently as far as that election is concerned.
I've said it openly here, Bukola. That's my home state, so I'm a person of, I'm interested in that place. And the security agencies, especially the police of Osun State Command, have demonstrated clearly that they are not fit and proper to provide security for that election. It's not about maybe 20 days away. And I thought, I was looking at the reassignment that was done yesterday by the Inspector General of Police, reshuffling the AIG. I hope they have reshuffled the AIG that oversees the superintendent of Osun State. And clearly, the Commissioner of Police in Osun State is not fit to be the one that will lead the police officers and men and women into that election. It's so clear. It's so clear. There are people, whichever side is dangling guns around every day, shooting in broad daylight. Osogbo has been total chaos all these days now. And the police in Osun State have not shown us who have been arrested. Nobody has been charged to court as of now. It's so bad. And beyond any warning system, the indices are there. And I think those who are perpetrating this, I think there's just one major thing I'm sure they wanted to achieve, is to prevent people from going to the polls on August 15. And I've said it elsewhere. I've said it many times. The citizens of Osun and the residents of Osun know who they are going to vote for. Let their vote count. What's the big deal? We've seen arson, we've seen burning of properties, we've seen looting, we've seen murders. Nobody as of today has ever been arrested and charged to court for one of these atrocities. No. And I hope it says a lot about the president too. Security is not in the hands of INEC, as it were. And so if the president is interested in having a fair election in Osun State, the IG should have been asked questions. What exactly is happening in Osun State? The IG was in Osun maybe about 3 or 4 weeks back. He accused the governor, he did that. But after that, what happened? Nobody. And I'm asking, if there has been any arrest made.
Mr. Fatade, because we are really pressed for time, the
Pardon
police...
me if I get too emotional, but that's my home state.
We totally understand.
And friends there.
We totally understand. We know that 30 persons have been charged to court. The first PRO was on this platform, and he made that revelation exclusively to us.
And it shows you guys the charge sheet. I mentioned their names.
We are following up on that story, actually. But let's take a look at this Nigeria, Mr. Fatade, just before we round things off with the national dailies. This Nigeria, again, leads with the fake agency, but let's go to perhaps the bottom part of that newspaper and see if we can take something else. There's Wike promotes 3,592 FCT workers, sets January for 10 projects. But beneath that story is one that I'm interested in. Plateau records 441 suspected cholera cases and 14 deaths. There's the Sanu story as well. But let's just touch on health a bit in Plateau States. This time not in security, but health concerns.
Yeah, there is a cholera window in Nigeria, usually an outbreak, and that's between June, July, August, sometimes September. So, and the governments, both national and state, are all aware of. And what causes cholera? Dirty environment, lack of potable water to drink, and this could have been prevented. It's so sad. But there's an annual window of cholera epidemic that comes upon us regularly in Nigeria. So if we have not prepared for the outbreak, these are the kind of results or consequences that we are going to face with. Bad.
Well, we have to leave it here this morning, Mr. Fatade.
And Mr. Fatade is the commissioning editor of The Conversation Africa. Thank you so much for coming through on the newspaper review segment. All right, I'm sure that he heard that. Let's now move on. We have many places to touch this morning, including getting more details about the Anambra building collapse. And of course, exploring the successes, the challenges, the gains, perhaps the losses of Nigeria's trade industry. Well, Jeffrey will be taking that shortly after this time out. Are you ready? Yeah, Jeffrey, over to you now.
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you, Bukola. Of course, let's switch gears now from the papers to what we're starting off the morning with, and that has to do with the state of affairs of industry. How will a country develop? How can we build a $1 trillion economy without industry, manufacturing? So the industry is quite critical to any form of success, and there are pillars it sits on. Well, we can query those pillars or whether or not they're in place to help us achieve that success. Now we have the Minister of State for Industry, Senator John, joining us right here in our Abuja studio. Honorable Minister, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
If you give me 2 hours, I have a lot of questions to ask you.
I can imagine.
And I'm sure my colleagues as well have a lot of. So let's start with maybe a quick assessment of what happened in February when the national policy was unveiled by the president. In fact, I had to check what was written, the vice president actually represented the president. And one of the things he said was what caught my attention. He said, we will measure success by the number of factories that open their gates at dawn, by the jobs created for our young men and women, by the exports that leave our ports bearing the mark of Nigerian excellence, and by the value retained within our economy. I think that's a very profound statement. It gives you a mapping of whatever it is documented in terms of policy statement should produce in terms of results. So how far are we with a national policy on industrialization?
Well, thank you. I mean, very profound. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, very profound, very signaling, about, and in itself, I think that first approximation, it just shows you the power of industry. It just shows you, and all of that. And I'm glad that at that, launch in February, 17, 2026, that, no lesser a person than the vice president of our country was the one who represented the president. I mean, for me and for all of us, it was an elevation. Industry, required and desired no less. I mean, we can't, you talk about a $1 trillion economy. We can't achieve that without production. I mean, we can't. I mean, you can do all the fiscal things, you can do all the monetary things, but you must produce. Production is key. I'm talking about, the profound statement by the vice president. I mean, that's right. And I think that, we were in putting together that policy. And putting together that policy was a response to Mr. President's inaugural address when he was, sworn in. He talked about an industrial policy. And why did he do so? Because in decades we've not had one. And all of that. And that in itself may have been the missing link. So he made a promise, and I think from that launch he delivered on that promise. But we've gone beyond, delivery, because a policy document, no matter how brilliant or excellent, we've not achieved anything much. I mean, we've had the Nigerian Industrial Revolution plan at the same time that, Morocco had its own and all of that. Morocco has overtaken South Africa, as of 2025. We are still where we are because of lack of implementation, because of lack of execution. So having all of this at the background, we tried to be bigger in terms of how this policy was going to be implemented than just the policy itself. And all of those profound things and statements made by the vice president can only get achieved only if we execute that policy. So first, I mean, we have an implementation framework that has owners, that has deliverables, that has timelines. On the day of that policy launch, I made a commitment that we're going to have reporting timelines. Every 90 days we report progress. And I'm glad to report that After the first 90 days, we reported, the state of affairs. And what were the highlights of our report? The fact, for example, that all the 8 strategic objectives of that policy were on course, had been enabled, right? And you can take them, you can look at them in different aspects. Is it, training and manpower development is key as we, push for industrialization. We're going to require, skilled manpower and all of that, working with ITF, Industrial Training Fund, working with NADDC in terms of skills for auto and all of that. We reported progress in, different lines. And we reported progress in terms of what we're doing in terms of value addition. We've tried to focus a lot on cotton, textile, and garment. And we're able to report we had, some kind of, value chain activation. The fact, for example, that, cotton, textile, garment was very big several years ago, competed with the, public sector in terms of job growth and all of that. Where are we today? As at 2001, the production of cotton in our country was close about 500,000, so. But what was it as at last year or 2 years ago? It had come down to about 20,000 metric tons. So what do we need to do? I physically visited a cotton farm somewhere in Ogun State in terms of our value activation, plan and what we tried to connect the value chains, to link a cotton, grower to a textile, to ginning textile and to garment. And we demonstrated that with the production of T-shirts in the minimum, basically. And
I do not want to cut your thought, Minister.
Yes,
since we're there, because it's part of my question, let's stay with, as you continue in your analysis and reporting.
Yes, please.
Let's remember that I've spoken with the people in the textile industry. In fact, I was supposed to do some things with them to show what has been happening in that sector. Textile used to have about 200 factories. From what they told me, now it's just 10% of that, 20 factories at best in the whole of the country. So this policy that is being implemented, do we have a timeline to make a certain level of progress? Let's say we move it from 20 factories to maybe 50 or maybe 100, and what time it is in reporting what you've done so.
Okay, and then the cotton, textile, and garment, sector is one of our most interesting because of how the numbers that we can have in terms of employment, because of how much it's going to be able to, the scarce foreign exchange that we spending close about 6 billion or so, dollars, per annum in importing, textiles and all of that, and finished garment, which is why, the focus is on that. And let me report, for example, that, at some point I've had to do a multi-city tour of moribund textile, factories. And
a lot of them.
Took me to Kaduna, took me to Lagos, and all of that. And we're trying to, we have presently what we call the CTG, Industrial Transformation Program, and all of that is on course. It is an aspect of that, for example, that got me to visit a cotton farm because of trying to see how we can, connect the value chains and all of that. If a garment manufacturer is assured of the availability of textile, if the textile manufacturer is assured of cotton, production and all of that, and that has been the missing link, and that is what that we're doing. It's we're in touch with a lot of development and investment partners that are very interested, in trying in investing. And I think one of the things that has been the challenge is getting the right policy framework. And we've also made a commitment that hopefully before or by the time we're doing our next 90-day report, we'll be able to get to a point in which that policy would have been validated to provide comfort to all those. Arise is already, Arise is next door in Benin Republic. Over the weekend, I think the vice president with some governors visited, and it was amazing, and things like that. So what we're trying to see how we can, make progress in terms of, parks and clusters and all of that, and get all of this together. And what we're hoping is that we're working with, there's an MOU with Matat that we're hoping is going to be signed. That MOU, it's unfortunately it's been delayed a bit, but within the next couple of weeks, we're hoping that this is going to be done. Matat is interested in terms of having to set up, industrial parks, in most of those moribund establishments and things like that. Yeah. And we're hoping that all that is going to come to bear. But like I was talking, in terms of, the numbers and all of that, some months back, last month or so, the Bank of Industry released its first impact assessment report that was certified by, KPMG and all of that. And what were the numbers? In terms of availability of finance, the Bank of Industry last year had disbursed close to 700 billion. The bank was not just interested in terms of how much it's disbursed, but in terms of the impact of that disbursement. And about 1.7 million jobs have been created. That's why I said that we are working hard in terms of execution and looking at all the streams and strategic objectives of the Nigeria industrial policy, just so that for the first time we can have a policy that works for the country and works for the Nigerian people.
So 2 questions in one before I bring my colleagues in. The cost of living in Nigeria is pretty high, so that tells you about the purchasing power. Doing business is also high because of the twin policy of government, which the government has said, bear with us because this is going to be a short-term pain, which is now 3 years, for a long-term gain. So I want you to speak to issues around credit and interest that people have to pay. Some of these industries, for those who have to borrow money. I know you talked about the Bank of Industry. And then on the other hand, I would like you to talk about the issues around skilling. Without skilling, what makes China great is not just name, it's about the quality of skilling they have to do things at scale. So what is the policy speaking to in terms of credits and in terms of skilling?
Okay, matters about interest rates and all of that are matters that the monetary authorities and all of that deal with. And I agree with you. Interest rates, especially commercial interest rates, are rooftop and all of that. But I think that for the policy, it's in terms of having, affordable long-term finance. Right? I mean, at the beginning of my, being sent to industry with industry mandate, I'd actually convened a meeting with the organized private sector, Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, and set up what I call the Industrial Revolution Work Group, with me as chair and the president of MAN as co-chair. And we identified a lot of these things and all of that, interest, finance, energy, and all as constraints, and all of that. And we've started with ministerial roundtables sometime last year, last quarter of last year. We had the first roundtable on power and energy infrastructure. In the next a few weeks or 1 month, we're going to have the next that's going to focus on affordable long-term finance. But having said so, I think that for the policy is having to have money that is affordable. I mean, capital, from the development, like you talk about the Bank of Industry. The Bank of Industry, until recently, has always sustained single-digit interest rates for a long time. For industry, and all of that. The situation and the circumstances may have now forced it to tweak it a little bit upwards, but that upwards is not more than 15% or thereabout. So that where this policy is still concerned with the cost of capital, with the cost of money that people, manufacturers and things like that have to pay to get all of that. I mean, at the beginning of the administration, the president had made available, about 200 billion, that's available for, manufacturers, for MSMEs, for nano businesses and all of that. And it's all the true, affordability of interest rates, of money and of capital and all of that. You talked about training, right?
Yes, skilling. I prefer to use the word skilling.
Yes, skilling. And talking about, the cost of money, government, the policy also talks about relationship and collaboration with development partners, with foreign capital that is affordable, low interest rates and all of that, that is going to be targeted at manufacturing industry. Skilling, and I'm going to address skilling in a number of respects. One, this government, the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, is very big on skilling. Very early in the administration, the president had taxed the Industrial Training Fund, which is one of the agencies under industry, in terms of its super program, scaling up skills and all of that. The story about the kind of how Dangote refinery had to depend on having to bring people from outside for basic skills for that Nigerians should be able to, perform, became quite a big challenge. And like I said at the beginning, as we aspire to be an industrial nation, that is how the necessity for skilling is also going to be going to be required. And okay, we have the National Council on Skill at the very highest level of government, headed by the Vice President. And that council has continued to meet, and I'm a member of that council. We have various, sector skills councils that are being developed for every sector that is important for industry. The Secretariat of the National Skills Council has just now been moved to the ITF because we want things to be practical and things to happen. So it's very, very important. And in different sectors, government is quite focused on developing the right skills that we need to perform in industry. And we're trying to tie that, not just skills for the sake of skills, but skills that are going to match with the requirements and the demands of industry to make sure that it works for government and works.
We'll come back to this skill matter and we'll be specific as to highlights in terms of bullet points as to this skill and whether people are really aware of some of these measures being taken. But I'm sure my colleagues, Bukola and Kelly, have some questions for you. Kelly, Bukola.
Well, it's always interesting to listen to the Honorable Minister speak because he's a man that some would say wear many hats. Former Minister of Sports, he served he got elected at the House of Representatives in 2003, served in the 5th, 6th, and 7th House of Reps, and then became a senator. I think he did maybe one term, 4 years as well, and he chaired really very incredible committees as a House of Assembly member. So there are a lot of other issues to engage Mr. Minister on, but let's stay with his primary office right now. Mr. Minister, there's so much to discuss as regards industrialization in Nigeria because it's been marred by stagnation. There's the question around the low GDP rates and contribution. In fact, let me see if I can read up something for you as regards some very key disturbing figures so long as industries in Nigeria is concerned. I had to just see if I can pull this up very quickly for you so you can just walk us through this. So as of early 2025, several manufacturing contributed just 9.62% to the country's gross domestic product. But that's not all. Manufactured goods accounted for less than 8% of total exports. And then Nigeria was classified in 2025 as an incompetent in its industrial trajectory by the Business Council for Africa as a result of these low numbers. What's your reaction to this?
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, and I agree with you. I'm not going to sit here and begin to contest those figures, figures that were reviewed out as of 2025. And I think it's also correct that the country has actually given very little attention to industrialization, and that in itself has been unfortunate. And it's the impact of all of that lack of attention, that we are now suffering from. But let me say that the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR has actually taken a different direction. After 1 year or thereabout, in which what the government had was a Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, the president came up with a novel in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, in which you had two ministers, but unlike previous times where you had two ministers, you had a minister of state. What the president did was have a Minister of Trade and Investment in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and have a Minister of State for Industry. And I think for the first time it now brought out, to the open, industry. And I like to say, for example, that the fact that we have an Nigerian industrial policy now is a testament to what that, that kind of innovation in that ministry, on the ministry has been able to achieve. Prior, like I said, the NIP that we have is the first policy document that we have in decades. And I'm not going to sit here and, talk about, the fact of, where we were, and as sad as it is. I'm going to talk about the progress that we've tried to make. Since after the 2025 analysis and evaluation, we've long had a policy in place, not just a policy. We have an industrial, framework that, I believe that for every passing moment, every passing day, is going to continue to get us to make, progress on most of those calls that we've talked about. The Nigerian industrial policy highlights all of these challenges and hopes that we should be able to make progress on the different dimensions. And not because, the challenges will no longer be there. The aspiration of the policy is that by 2030, industry's contribution to GDP should rise to about 25%. And I think that, for every nation that is classified as an industrial nation, the manufacturer's contribution to GDP is upwards, is in the double digits. And I think that what we try to do is to see how much progress we can make in the course of implementing the policy, and we've tried to activate various, value chain and value addition, mechanisms. Just about, a few weeks ago, we convened, what I call the Cocoa Value Addition Summit that brought, together, cocoa producing countries, about 4, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Nigeria, and the European Union and all of that. And the hallmark of that session was about, the fact that we spent too much time and too much effort always exporting our raw materials. We need to develop them. We need to see how we can add value, because that is going to be the only way that we can make progress and can make development. So, it's manufacturing's contribution, as at first quarter of this year, was about, close to about 3.29, the highest, in 4 years, not where we think we should be, but I think that it shows a trend, it shows, not unlike a boom that comes and goes. It means, for example, that, we are in the right direction, and we're going to continue to make progress on that. By the time, everything, sometime again, this year, the president, extended the ban on share nut. The country produces, about more than 40% of the world's share nut production. And, the value in terms of value addition that we retain is very minimal, if at all. So all of these, policy decisions, all of these decisions that have been taken are intended to tackle in the main most of those challenges, and all of that. Are we where we should be? No. Are we, in the right direction? I think that, very optimistically, yes, and hope that the recognition of industry and its role in terms of the progress that we expect to make can only continue to add and to get us to solve all of those, constraints and all of those statistics, Kelly, that you've read out.
Mr. Minister, so let me just one more question. I'm also wondering perhaps what the conversation is like between the government at the center and at the subnational levels. I know that, for instance, in Cross River State, the former governor, Professor Ben Ayade, made attempts to industrialize the states, to move it from perhaps a civil servant state to a state that has industries. And that is even the reality of many states in Nigeria. Most states are tagged as civil servant states. So I'm wondering perhaps what the government at the center is trying to do about the factories and industries at the subnational level. Then my second question would be, because of how people perceive industries, some say a lot of industries in Nigeria are on life support. They say some are practically gasping for breath. Some have packed their bags and have left Nigeria. But maybe perhaps we could speak to just how the current economic headwinds, especially at the global level, how it's affecting the markets here in Nigeria.
Okay, talking about what's happening, what's the relationship between the national and the subnationals and all of that. That if industries are going to be established, industries are established in states, they're located in states. If I've done visitations to industries across the country, those visits take me to states. So our subnationals are so critical and so strategic to any progress that we expect to make. And we've taken that into consideration in terms of the kind of work we've tried to do. When we're putting together the Nigerian industrial policy, we made sure that, on the day that that policy was validated, we had, the governors forum, we had, Algon, we had, all of that in the room because it was important, to have them. At some point last month, I made a presentation to the National Economic Council, the Nigerian industrial policy. So it's and all of that is an attempt to see how, the subnationals are part of what we're doing. We have a program that we call, for example, the, AFDB Industrial Cluster Program that seeks to see how we can, establish and set up, close to about 70 industrial clusters as engine rooms for the kind of activation of industrialization that we expect to have. About 60 of those are owned by states. So it's also key. It's also important, and that we've continued to work, in sync with them. I mean, we have a current, an ongoing program with the UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. The Program for Country Partnership, PCP, is the first time that program is on. And, we've agreed with UNIDO that the next time I'm going to go to NEC is going to be to make a presentation on the PCP. All of that is because, we just finished the National Council of Industry, Trade and Investment in Enugu. And that participation of that, had to do with the subnationals and all of that. So that relationship is robust, is strong, and it's important, in terms of what progress we expect to achieve. And then, the second question about, the climate, about, what is going on, the headwinds, it's, you are right. Before this program started, we were talking, and I said that, it's quite a task pushing industrialization under, very severe constraints, the headwinds internationally. But having said so, I think that is why, we've had to, do certain things that are a bit more inward looking. Thank God, in terms of the petrochemicals, we have the Dangote refinery. Quick by the way, I should be visiting by tomorrow morning, coming on stream and doing so much to see how, we can assist government and the country to cushion, the kind of severe impact that should have happened. The AFCFTA, in terms of making, Africa about 4-something billion population, 1 point, something billion population, market, available, just so that, as a continent, we can see how we can encourage trading, amongst ourselves, trading within the continent, within the sub-region, and all of that. So all those are going on. When we talk about the need to, when I talked about the Cocoa Summit that we convened, it's because of the need, for example, to play together, not singly, not individually. Those are the kinds of responses, that are going on, that 4 countries that control about 75% of the world cocoa production need to band together in terms of some kind of, alliance and see how they can respond to what's going on. I'll give you, an example. We have what we call the EUDR, the European Union Deforestation Regulation, that's going to come on stream, for big manufacturers and, medium, manufacturers by about December 2026. And in June, it's going to affect, small-scale cocoa producers and all of that. About, you need to traceability issues, standardization issues and all of that. Individually, the countries may not be able to actually, respond, to this as much as all these 4 countries coming together. Because while we agree, while we support, the need for deforestation, because the cocoa farmer in Ikom, and I'm a cocoa farmer in Itung, doesn't need to be reminded that we need to protect the environment and the soil. But what is the issue is that we need to be in that same room that determines those standards. All these standards is going to come with cost and traceability. Who's going to bear the burden for that? So this is our own way of responding, to what the international climate is, and the fact, for example, that a lot of our raw materials and all of that, we need to be competitive. We need to get to a point in which we can be competitive by the kinds of actions that we do in order to make that kind of response, and all of that. That we not just be talking about trading for the sake of trading, but the quality of that trading is important, because that's what makes us be competitive in a global economy and in a global world.
Well, thank you, Honorable Minister. Perhaps one of the very exciting things that you've, talked about in your commentary so far would be the Nigeria industrial policy. And last year at the NESG Summit, you did outline the components of this policy. But I'm more concerned about the operationalization of this policy in the areas that matter. Because if we're seeing, the efficacy of the policy, it would translate, into results, for instance, in our high import dependency area. So when we look at the Nigeria First policy, for instance, introduced by the administration, if indeed the industrial policy is being operationalized, why aren't we seeing results in the area of, the prioritization of purchasing made in Nigeria goods, at least in all ministries, departments, and agencies. That's on the one hand. The operationalization of this policy in the area of local manufacturing of vehicles, for instance. What we see rather, in government circles, it's an appetite for imported vehicles. So I wonder if, the ministry is, visible in the area of advocacy for the operationalization of this NIP, such that we can see results in these areas. Nigeria First policy, is it just a policy on paper? We've seen a reduction in import tariff for vehicles, but when the tariff was high, what was the government doing in the area of supporting local industries? I'd like you to speak to that.
Well, I can tell you this that, the Nigerian First policy is being operationalized. It's not just, something that is a pronouncement or something that is on paper. One of the, mandates that I have as Minister of State in charge of industry is the promotion of made in Nigeria goods and services. That is so key, that is so important. And one of the times I had cause to speak about this at the First Executive Council, I gave statistics in terms of what that, did our, just a change of attitude, in terms of having to buy made in Nigeria goods and having to, for example, patronize services that are Nigerian services and all of that. How much it will contribute to manufacturing growth, how much it will contribute to jobs availability and all of that. So it's so key and it's being operationalized. I can mention, for example, that we have, ongoing work on this campaign. The only thing is that what has delayed it is that, because it should not be the first time that such a campaign is going to be mentioned, we are trying to make sure that when we mention it, it's something that is going to be practical, something that is going to work. And one of the missing links in looking at experiences from other countries, in Italy, in South Africa, and all of that is, how can we get this institutionalized in such a manner that it becomes what guides what and what that we do. But beyond that, and this is not the first time I'm going to say this, that it's gradually that need, the Nigerian First policy is now working with the Bureau for Public Procurement, which has been working quite hard and has done quite a lot in terms of getting a framework that is going to guide making sure that this policy is operationalized. I have, there are two key sectors within industry that we've gone far in terms of that relationship with the PPP. This has to do with what? The auto sector under the Nigerian Automated Design and Development Council, NADDC, and again, I'm going to get back to CTG. That procurement, trying to make it mandatory, in terms of procurement of, military and paramilitary uniforms, school uniforms, NYC, and all of that is going on as I speak with you, and it's going to be operationalized very soon. If, for example, if you are with me on the studio and I was stepping out after this program, you're going to find out that the car that I'm using as my official car is a Nigerian assembled car. Not just me, even the Minister of Trade and Investment uses a Nigerian assembled car. And a lot more ministers in cabinet. All of this is going on. So beyond just the pronouncement, we are making sure that this is operationalized, because that's the way to go. In the course of visiting different industries and all of that, who are staying back in the country and are producing and manufacturing, have come face to face with goods that are produced, but goods that are still in their warehouses because they are not being bought and all being purchased. So all of these make it very imperative to make sure that the president's pronouncement on Nigerian First policy doesn't just remain as a pronouncement. The Executive Order 3 and all of that speaks and responds to all of these concerns, and I can assure you that for me as Minister of State for Industry, who expects that the Nigerian industrial policy should be implemented, the only way that this policy can achieve its objective and its impact is to make sure that made in Nigerian goods, having to patronize them goes beyond a matter of patriotism to a matter in which people actually also believe in the quality of those goods, and which is why in promoting and pushing this advocacy, we're also concerned with quality under the Nigerian, quality, that we're working with. UNIDO, and other agencies.
Well, Honorable Minister, it's exciting to note that your vehicle is a made in Nigeria assembled vehicle, and it's exciting to note that other ministers are following suit. But there are other key officials in this administration that should also lead by example. The very long fleet of the car of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, GCFR, I'm not quite sure that those vehicles are made in Nigeria. We could talk about other key officials as well. Much of the tractors that are being distributed, purchased, perhaps by the Ministry of Agriculture, are imported. And so we expect a lot more advocacy from your ministry in that regard. And you talked about...
I'm sure you will continue to make progress. It's
of course, we're recording progress in that regard, but it's largely driven by reduction in importation of petroleum products, hence the Dangote Petrochemical Refinery. Another matter I want you to address is the bill before the National Assembly advocating 30% value addition of raw materials before they are exported. What is your ministry doing in terms of advocacy to ensure that that bill becomes law?
Well, I think that what we've done is beyond advocacy, and I mean it's that bill will be one of the most important legislations. On the day we launched the Nigerian Industrial Policy, I mean, I talked about immediate enablers of that policy. The immediate enablers I mentioned were about two. The first was the fact that we needed the ban on share nut to be extended. The second was, the 30% value addition bill, that was, sponsored by the Raw Materials Social and Development Council. I mean, we followed that. I mean, unfortunately, it got passed by both chambers of the National Assembly. It got sent to Mr. President for assent. I mean, the presidency sent it to the Attorney General of the Federation's office, as normally as it should be done. And I followed up. I mean, I had engagements with both the Attorney General and the Solicitor General and Permanent Secretary. And we had sessions, we had to call officials of the Raw Materials Development Council and, the special, SSA to the Vice President, on agric, and food security and all of that. So it's something that, I've been personally interested in because I know what that will mean. It will be revolutionary to say, to say it. And I mean, that bill has run into a few, a few constraints, and it's been, tweaked again, just to get it fit for purpose. So what I can tell you, for example, is that, I mean, every day, I mean, we're working and we are concerned about that bill, and we are trying to make sure that ultimately it eventually becomes a piece of legislation, and it will be a great enabler for Nigeria's industrial push and in Nigeria's industrialization.
Honorable Minister, so let's talk about one elephant in the room, and that has to do with Ajaokuta steel industry. In all that you have said, I've not heard about it. It's moribund, supposed to save Nigeria in excess of between 3, maybe 5 billion in terms of what we can accrue as revenue. We know that the president had traveled on the invitation of King Charles, and part of the deal that was secured was about, I think, 700 million pounds or dollars investment in our ports, and there are still components that will not be coming from Nigeria from outside. What is this government saying practically about the steel industry, specifically Ajaokuta? Are they not touching it, or let's just forget about it? It's just a bad investment that been issue. I would like to get a clear statement on Ajaokuta, and also the issue about power, how you're navigating that with the members of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria who complain that significant portion of their investment goes into power, maybe about 40-50%. And if you do that in numbers, we're talking maybe 8 to 10 trillion. So, but let's start with the Ajaokuta steel industry. What is the government of President Bola Tinubu saying through your ministry about Ajaokuta?
Okay, I mean, incidentally, fortunately, I mean, the government, President Bola Tinubu GCFR did not just create a Ministry of Steel and has a Minister of Steel Development for fun. It's for the kind of progress that he expects to be made, because of how...
Yeah, I had to ask you because it's industry related.
Because of how steel, how strategic it is, and all of that. And I think that, the government doesn't just think that Ajaokuta has become moribund. and I think that, in the last couple of months, the Minister of Steel Development has actually been in the news in terms of the efforts that are going on over what should happen to that facility.
So we're not seeing anything.
And what I can tell you, for example, is that as I visit Dangote refinery tomorrow, the next day, Thursday or Friday, I'm meeting with, a consortium, a group, that itself is also interested in Ajaokuta, because, for industry, like you mentioned, there's no industry really without steel. So what kind of industrialization do we want to achieve? So what I can tell you is that fortunately in the next couple of days, I'm having a conversation with an international consortium, that is in Nigeria because it's also going to the refinery, but it's also in Nigeria in addition because when it heard that I was going to come to Lagos, they're also very interested in having a conversation with me on steel and on the interest on Ajaokuta.
So are you doing this in partnership with your colleague, Minister?
Definitely. It's because
we haven't heard much from that minister. A lot of Nigerians don't even know his name sometimes. With greatest respect.
Like I said, in fairness to him, he's done quite, to make sure that Ajaokuta becomes a different story in the positive. I can tell you that. And after these meetings and sessions and all that, you're going to find much more activity going on that. The second thing about energy is that, energy is the big elephant in the room. Energy, according to the statistics by man, energy, constitutes about 40% of the operational costs, of manufacturers. 40%. And I think it's. I mentioned to you that sometime last quarter of last year, I had my first ministerial roundtable. That ministerial roundtable was on energy, energy and power infrastructure. And one of the, in that room was the Minister of Power, was the Minister of Petroleum Gas, Minister of Petroleum Oil, and all of that. And I've continued to, because of how serious and how important, energy is. When I made a presentation, I appeared before the Presidential Task Force on, petroleum, sector value addition headed by Mr. Fala Adiola, a few days ago. And I praised them for considering industry very, very important, because it's not at all times that people have that link. In some countries, I mentioned to them, the ministry is Ministry of Energy and Industry and all of that. So, I was in Gas Tech last year. I was at NOG, because, they need to, the conclusions of the Energy Roundtable last year was in the fact that we need to look at, blended power in terms of, grid power, in terms of, renewables, in terms of gas power. And Nigeria is blessed with enormous gas resources, but we need to see how we can get that linked up, to industry. The AKK, pipeline, very soon, the Ajaokuta Gwagwalada line, is going to be available. But like I said to that committee, availability is one, getting it to the last mile is the other, and all of that. And it's also important. So we're working and hoping that, this big challenge, can actually, be solved, in terms of various ways. When we talk about the NIP is big on closer industrial parks, it's because of the need to get, a number of these together in one location, just so that we can attract all of these, together, various industries and, factories can actually benefit from common services. All of that will be able to tackle and to see how can be.
Minister, I don't know how much time we have for this conversation, so I'm going to do two things in one, so that my colleagues can come in within the time we have. First, of course, we can't have you here without talking politics, but before we go to politics, let's talk about, at the end of this administration, under your ministry, so that we can hold you accountable, which the administration will end in May 2029. If the president wins, he gets re-elected, gets sworn in again. But between now and the end of this term, what can we look at in the Ministry of Industry and say, this is what Senator John Eno achieved for Nigeria?
Okay, very quickly, and I think that they can see the rehash of both some of the conversations we've had here. It's
just give us 2 minutes.
Yes,
it's not a lot.
Yes, I started this conversation by saying, for example, that for the first time in decades, we have a Nigerian industrial policy, right? Secondly, beyond policy, we have an implementation framework that speaks to ownership, speaks to responsibility, accountability, speaks to timelines, and We've committed to a 90-day report, reporting, framework. We've done the first one. We're getting set for a second. And each of those reports indicates progress that we've made and all of that in terms of value addition and productivity. And I mean, that is going to mean that will be held accountable. I mean, we're doing various, to see how we can, talking about, we hope to make progress in terms of CTG, cotton, textile, and garment. The National Economic Council, sometime last year, approved the setting up of a CTG board, and things like that to bring together all of this and working, together on most of those. So, basically, we've committed to the fact that industry's contribution, to our GDP should be rising. We're making steady progress on that, and to show that there's a tone, there's a focus, there is all of that. Yeah.
Let's go on to politics. I now hand over to bring in my colleagues. You served in the 8th Senate. That's the Bukola Saraki Senate. As a matter of fact, sometimes people reference that was the last Senate that really oversighted the executive, blaming Ahmed Lawan's Senate as rubber stamp, Godswill Akpabio leadership as double rubber stamp. These are things that they've always pushed back on because of the oversight responsibility, the speed of approvals and the things they've done. Now, I know you don't want to put your colleagues on a blast, but that is the perception of Nigerians. I'm reporting to you that it appears people are not really quite impressed with the activities of the National Assembly in terms of its quality of oversight to do the work that's well. I'm asking you this not as a minister, but as the former member of the parliament.
Well, I mean, it's let me say this right away, and I think I say this because, up until when, I got appointed as minister, by, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I'd spent all my political career in the legislature, starting from the State House of Assembly, to 12 years in the House of Reps and to 4 years in the Senate. And I find something unfortunate that the legislature continues to face. A lot of the times, people think that the only time the legislature is working is when it is fighting with the executive. No. And I don't think that if you go and check, most of the greatest progress has been made, by, a legislature that is not about fight, it's about getting things done. At the end of the day, the contributions and what impacts on the Nigerian people is not the fights that occur, it's the progress that is made. Progress that is made in terms of number of bills that have been signed, that have become law, progress in terms of, the time period it takes to get things done or executed and all of that.
So are you saying that this National Assembly, the 10th, has served the interests of Nigerians?
Well, I mean, it's
a straight question, Minister.
Well, I don't think I like to be put on the spot on that.
Okay.
I mean, because the answer to that is going to vary depending on who wants to talk about it. All I can say, for example, is that the fact that the 10th Senate, the 10th National Assembly, is not involved in fighting and in conflict with the executive doesn't mean that it is not making a contribution or it is not doing the work that it's supposed to do.
Let me bring in my colleagues. I don't know, Bukola or Kelly.
Well, I mean, Honorable Minister, I'm so sorry we didn't agree to go this line, but because you're a man who has a lot of experience, I'm glad that you've mentioned that you started your career, at the State House of Assembly, and then you did 12 years House of Reps, 4 years Senate, and you chaired some really very essential committees. So maybe I should also just touch on this scandal that has refused to go, the PFIPC scandal. I know that perhaps it's not your job to talk to Nigerians about it, but it's rubbing off on this current administration. The House of Reps, they have summoned the IGP to present Ademi Martin, and they've given the IGP 48 hours. But there are times when they give those directives and they are flouted and nothing is done.
Well, I think that, the scandal is unfortunate. But I think I also like the Nigerian people to also follow the conversation and the developments. As unfortunate as the scandal is, yesterday the Accountant General of the Federation, was in the House of Reps. Either yesterday or thereabout, the DG Budget Office of the Federation was also there. The bottom line is that from what those two, their submissions were in the National Assembly, no public money has been expended. That's the most important. As regrettable as the fact that an agency not authorized, that is not legal, has been operational, but I need Nigerians to also know, when people get angry and mad, people should also have the chance to also listen. And what do I expect people to listen? The fact, for example, that the chief of staff himself was the one that first escalated this sometime last year, and all of that. So the House of Reps has summoned, the IGP, to produce. Let's see how, how progress is made on that. But let's also have open, our minds to the fact that after all said and done, there is no record, no indication that 1 kobo of public funds has been spent or released to an illegitimate or an illegal organization or agency.
Well, perhaps we'll leave politics and go to the substance of trade issues, which is why you're here. I wonder if you have addressed this as sufficiently as it should be. The matter of the Ajaokuta trade industry. There have been several committees, set up to ensure that it moves from the moribund status, over the decades to, actual operations. What is the guarantee under this administration that it would become a reality? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I'd like you to also address the matter of the manufacturing industry, such that the industrial policy that you have beautifully outlined will not just be on paper. Manufacturers are reporting 50% of their production cost, from power, and there's also the energy aspect, which is subject to the vagaries of the conflict in Iran. And this administration, over the months of this conflict, has not done anything to provide succor to Nigerians, and neither has it done to the manufacturing sector either. And so would your industrial policy be just a document and not a reality to address the needs of the manufacturing industry, which really should be supporting the economy? So those two questions.
Okay, very quickly. I mean, I'd rather allow the commitments about Ajaokuta, allow that for the Minister of Steel Development, who, like I've already mentioned, a lot of effort is going on to make sure that that facility can actually, be made to benefit the Nigerian people. But having said so, in the course of this session, I've also said that, either Thursday or Friday, I mean, I'm taking, a chance, visit to Lagos, to Dangote Refinery, to meet with an international consortium, and all of that, that's interested in Ajaokuta. So what it is that conversations are going on, and hopefully those conversations get us to, an end that is desired by the Nigerian people. Talking about manufacturers and the NIP, document, I've spent quite some time talking about the fact that we've gone beyond the policy document. We're talking about, implementation and executing that policy. Results may not be immediately as impactful, but all I can guarantee is that, we are committed to it. We are committed to disciplined execution. We are committed to, reporting timelines, about steady progress that is being made. Those challenges that you've mentioned are challenges that have existed for far too long to expect that a few months after the launch of an industrial policy, that the results will immediately become as positive as expected. I agree because of, our circumstances. People are impatient. But I'd just like to assure Nigerians that we have a leadership that is committed to delivery, and that is what we're doing. Everything that we try to do, whether in terms of electric vehicles, whether in terms of training, whether in terms of trying to make sure that finance is there's patient capital for industry that is also affordable. All of those things are being done. We're working for the first time with the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. I mentioned that we have the Industrial Revolution Work Group that I chair, and that is co-chaired by the President of MAN. We have different, manufacturing, clusters, that escalate, things. The response that they get from the Ministry of Industry and Investment has not been the kind of response that they've been getting before in the positive, because, I've been in various meetings with Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and different industrialists. I'd say to them all the time that, I'm happy to be, their champion, in government, and we're demonstrating that every day and hoping that those constraints, those bottlenecks, to industrialization and to industry are things that we're able to get sorted and overcome and get our country. I mentioned at the beginning of this that Nigeria and Morocco were at the same level several years ago.
Yeah.
Today, Morocco has not only gone beyond us; it's overtaken even South Africa. And I think that we should be challenged by that and are challenged by that, and hoping that our own variables, our own competitive edge in terms of our population, in terms of the abundance of raw materials, in terms of the push that we make, that under the AFCFTA, Nigeria is going to be that industrial hub, for the rest of Africa.
Perhaps maybe in the reality we have lost that tag of being tagged as giant of Africa. Perhaps we have lost it. But I'm wondering, as we sit here, and perhaps what the challenges would be for you as the minister who sits over that ministry. I'm wondering perhaps what that challenge or the challenges are. I know some you may not want to say on air, but maybe a yes or no question as well. You had always wanted to be governor of Cross River State. Is that a vision you still share? Just a yes or no, Minister?
Kelly, you really want me to answer that question? The next election cycle is starting in the next election cycle is starting in 2027, and I'm not on the ballot.
How about in the future, Minister?
Okay, that way, yeah.
Kelly, I'm not on the ballot.
Maybe the
question 2027.
I don't know, we're totally out of time.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you, Minister.
So, are you going to contest someday, even though you're not on this ballot?
Let's proceed beyond 2027.
Okay. That's a political answer, and I'm used to politicians.
And I'm a politician.
Yes, I know the meaning of that answer, but I will not infer, but I'll allow you infer. The audience to infer what they think about your answer. Honorable Minister, thank you for coming on the program. We do appreciate it. And we hope that we can engage a lot more. And the Nigerian people should also be able to find a place. Where can they find a place to always monitor your progress? Quick.
Well, it's my office is available.
A website.
I've talked about. I have an SSA on strategic communication. It's going to make that available. As soon as I get out of here, and all of that. Yeah.
Honorable Minister John Minister of State for Industry. Thank you, as always, for coming through. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy, to come back here when I'm needed.
We will call you. It's our job to call you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, guys, back to you.
Oh, yes, Jeff. Thank you indeed, Mr. Minister, for stopping by our studios. And maybe we should call out other ministries as well and ministers to come give account to Nigerians about what they are doing. But let's switch gears to something else. It has to do with building collapse in Anambra State. We also hear and having breaking news that there's a building collapse here in Lagos. We'll bring you up to speed about that. But let's cross over to Anambra State, where the Commissioner for Physical Planning and Urban Development, Anambra State, has been standing by to speak with us. Mr. Chijoke Ojukwu, who joins us live on the program. Mr. Chijoke, thank you so much and for holding by and standing by to talk to us here on the program. Perhaps we should begin with an update. Where are we in terms of recovery?
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. Unfortunately, as at yesterday, we were able to retrieve 2 corpses from the site of the unfortunate incident of the building collapse. And we'll continue again today. And we express our sincere condolence to the families of people who lost their lives. And as a government, it is our resolve that to get to the root cause because of the building collapse.
So talk to us about that building. What more do we know? We hear it's a hostel. There were students there. Students from which school, how many students, and all of that, so that we have an idea and a sense of where exactly in Anambra State this happened.
Okay, the hostel is located at Anambra in Anambra, local government area of the state. It is the 3-story building which serves as a hostel for students of Federal Polytechnic Oko Anambra State. We understand that from our preliminary investigation that the building had some structural defects to the knowledge of the management, but unfortunately and sadly, management put pecuniary interest, monetary gain over and above the safety of lives of the occupants of the building. So that's what we know for now. So it had the structural defects. So the reasonable thing would have been to see to the evacuation of the building and notify the authorities for the building to be pulled down. But instead, the management continued to put people in there and collect money from them. So that's what I have at the moment.
So what do we know about the identities of these students? And if, these students are students of the Federal Polytechnic, OCO, it would be difficult to lay any responsibility, at the doorstep of the institution. But how many more buildings do we suspect, could be defective in that particular area because it's reportedly close to the Federal Polytechnic itself?
Okay, luckily for us, since that incident happened, members of the public are sending in actionable intelligence, pointing to other buildings which they suspect may suffer the same. Similar to that, we have constituted an investigation panel, which is populated with the chairman and secretaries of all in the building industry, the engineers, the town planners, the builders, the architects. Consider the investigation panel populated with the chairman and secretary of these optional bodies, and then the Ministry of Physical Planning and the Anambra State Material Testing Lab, and their common mandate will be to investigate the root cause of the collapse of the building, so we wouldn't be speculating. And then mandatorily, we will extend the scope of the investigation to other buildings within the proximity of the building that collapsed, including the ones that received academic intelligence about. So we're going to spread the net and identify those buildings, particularly multi-level buildings. We're going to conduct an all-round material soil test and those buildings. Whichever one that doesn't pass the test, we shall be closing the buildings down. And in this case of seeming negligence of the management of the building, we shall also be prosecuting anybody who is indicted as having taken part in this unfortunate incident. And we shall also be recommending that the state revokes henceforth any building, any land housing any building which collapses within the state. I think that will send the right signal to the members of the public that is no longer business as usual within Anambra State.
Honorable Commissioner, while this may not necessarily be within your jurisdiction, but it's also part of the conversation, doesn't this incident then speak to perhaps a deficit in hostel accommodation for students of the Federal Polytechnic, hence the resort to nearby accommodation? And is this part of the concerns and investigation of the Anambra State government after this unfortunate incident?
Well, like I said, I do not have the knowledge about the hostel, the extent of hostel accommodation within the Federal Polytechnic. But we know usually around tertiary institutions, some students also actually prefer to stay outside the school. But they feel it gives them more freedom, it's also gives them more freedom and liberty and more comfortable. So I do not know the extent of the hostel accommodation they have within the local polytechnic, but I know like usually some students who like to live outside the school or within close proximity to the school.
Hello, Commissioner. So I'm wondering, isn't it embarrassing that you're saying you do not have these details? This collapse happened 2 days ago. In fact, it was almost going under the radar before Nigerians got to hear about it yesterday. So more than 48 hours after, you still do not have details about this. And then whose job is it to regulate these kind of buildings? Because I know that state governments always get to collect a lot of monies from people who build structures. In fact, for virtually every building, before the building is completed, you always see that mark of X and with a number. So who's going to take the responsibility for this kind of collapse and the impact?
Okay, well, I think you did not understand the question your colleague asked. Our question was about the extent of accommodation in Federal Polytechnic, including the federal institution. I said I do not have knowledge about the extent of accommodation within Federal Polytechnic group. The state government, of course, does not regulate federal institutions. So it is something within and squarely within the knowledge of the federal authorities at the Federal Polytechnic group. So it was what I said, not the issue of physical planning. Our question was basically about the fact that students have to stay outside. We point to the fact that there is deficiency in hostel accommodation within the Federal Polytechnic group. So I think we need to put that in prominence.
Yes, but one would have thought that also has there been any cabinet meeting since this happened, to perhaps review and evaluate what played out?
Yes, like I said, of course, we recently we have a meeting. We had a meeting yesterday, school meeting. But like I said, we have set up an investigation panel. The position is the chairman and secretary of all the professional bodies in the built industry. We have the officers of the Ministry of Physical Planning, and then we also have the Anambra State Material Testing Lab. And the commander, like we said, will be to investigate the root cause of the collapse of the building so that we will not be acting as speculation. And like I said, we have also received actionable intelligence and pointers that there may be other buildings within that proximity that will suffer the same fate. And we said we are going to extend our activity to review multi-floor buildings all around that area to make sure that they pass integrity tests. And then anyone that doesn't pass that, we're going to recommend that it should be pulled down immediately.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, one thing is certain: for the families who have lost perhaps students, I'm not sure just how they are receiving this news. Has the state government met with the families? Have you spoken with them on the phone?
Yes, we met our government yesterday, myself and my brother commissioners, Commissioner for Works and Commissioner for Housing in Anambra State. Officials of the Anambra State Physical Planning were also there on ground with the Women Control Departments of the Anambra State Physical Planning. Yes, we met one or two of them yesterday when the two companies were pulled out. And then, of course, yeah, the Commissioner of Health was also on ground yesterday. And like I said, the activities will continue there today. We are going back to site today to continue the search and rescue operation. So it's an ongoing activity. Yes, we have spoken to members of the families, and of course, they are part of the people that will be hearing from when the panel of investigation kickstart their activities.
So, as a quick follow-up to that, how real are the concerns that there just may be more people trapped beneath the debris of the collapsed structure?
Yes, students that were spoken to yesterday, they point to the fact that there may still be a few people who are trapped under the debris of the building, unfortunately. it is a sad event.
So does that mean that all occupants of that structure have not yet been accounted for?
Exactly, that is the point. All occupants have not been accounted for. So
who's the owner of this structure? Has the state government been able to identify the owner of this structure?
No, from what we know, the occupants of the building said they've been only been dealing with the management of the place, and we have gotten the details, the phone numbers, because we understand that since the incident, the phone numbers of the management of course, we have gotten actionable intelligence, and we're going to work on that with the police authorities. But as I said, dealing with the landlord, the only be dealing with the manager. The details of the manager will be provided, so we will forward that to the police authority.
Well, we hope that the landlord, the owner of the structure, will be identified soon, and whatever needs to be done to ensure he's brought to justice is done, because some of the talking heads from that report point to concerns that had been expressed about the defective nature of this structure prior to the collapse. Now, it is very worrying, your revelation that all persons who were occupants of this building have not been identified. So from information that you're gathering so far following the collapse of the structure, how many more people are you still looking at as rescue operations continue?
Like you rightly said, the building itself has no resident porter who could maybe have a manifest of the occupants of the building. I think the only person who can give us full details of the occupants of the building would be the management, the person who collects the rent and who rents out the buildings to students. But it is speculative from the information we gathered from witnesses around this. So I would still be expecting about maybe 3 to 5 more persons trapped under the rubble. Investigation, and like I said, we will continue once I finish this interview, we will return to the location. Such a
We'll keep tabs with you and see how we can get updates as regards this tragic incident, so that Nigerians can be informed about what has happened, and those who are responsible, the owner of the building, and perhaps the regulators are also held to account. It's a really sad and tragic incident. My colleague Bukola perhaps has a question for you just before we go.
I'm just wondering how hands-on your ministry is in the area of ensuring that developers comply with building regulations, what documentations they provide to ensure that they have secured building approvals, and if you have a challenge of officials to ensure that buildings either under construction or are standing buildings that have met all required documentations and are safe for habitation.
Yes, we have that since my appointment as Commissioner of Fiscal Planning and Urban Development within the state. We are rejigging the whole system, putting structures in place to make sure that every building plan submitted to the ministry complies with the legal requirements. We are particular about details about the building. Just yesterday, published a notice in the morning stating that only the core professionals in the building industry will henceforth be allowed to submit in the building plan for approval to our offices. that notice was also shared with professional bodies, and it is something they received with excitement. I also spoke this morning with the executive members of these professional bodies, the engineers, the architects, the builders, the town planners. I spoke to them, and then after this interview, I will continue that meeting. So it is issue of physical planning is at the core what Mr. Governor Soludo wants to achieve in Anambra State. In fact, since Friday last week, we have pulled down over 10 houses. We did not meet legal requirements. We pulled down 16 lock-up shops at New Market Road. We pulled down over 10 buildings at Impole Zubaka. We pulled down a building at Transit Layout. Where individuals jump into state land and start building without the application paper or approval from the states. So we have taken drastic measures, and it is an ongoing activity. And like I said, every considerable legal measure is on the table, inclusive of the prosecution, forfeiture of properties. For example, in this instance where there's a building collapse, we shall recommend that that land will be revoked and then forfeited to the states.
All right.
So, this is something to seriously, and then luckily you have correspondents in Anambra State, and then what we shall be doing that going forward, every of our enforcement activity, we shall incorporate the correspondence so that
we're totally pressed for time, and one would have thought that maybe this building perhaps would have also been pulled down before this collapse happened. One would have also thought that perhaps maybe there would have been rescue efforts, search and rescue to overnight, so that whatever. We have to leave it here. Many questions indeed for you and your government, but must anchor at this point. Chijoke Ojukwu is the Commissioner for Physical Planning and Urban Development, Anambra State. Thank you indeed. We'll keep our eyes and ears on the ground and get more updates as we have them in the coming hours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
This is the morning brief. We're also hearing news just in that there's also a building collapse here in Lagos, the Ajuwo area in Lagos. Details are still very sketchy, but what we know is that it's been confirmed that there is a building collapse in Ajuwo according to eyewitness account. I'm sure that the Lagos state government will visit that site any moment from now. A fatal building collapse in Ajuwo area of Lagos State. It's a 3-story building. We hear that 2 went underneath, and the topmost floor is now like a bungalow. People we understand has said to be trapped. So that's the latest news just in here in Lagos. There's also a building collapse. We'll bring you up to speed right here on Channels TV. As soon as we get more updates, we have a team in that direction as we speak.
Following that, let's touch on a very important matter that affects, your mobility, your commerce, and your day-to-day activity. The acting Federal Controller of Works, Ogun State, Engineer Adeleye, has announced that the proposed Kara Bridge expansion joint repair that should have begun today. As a matter of fact, we're supposed to have a conversation to that effect on the impact, has been put on hold, and a rescheduled date shall be announced in due course. Now, this is very disappointing to a number of Nigerians. This ought not to have been deferred, particularly because of the nature of accidents and the irregularity of accidents that we've been experiencing on that particular portion of the bridge time and again. The one that occurred, was it at the beginning of this year or towards the end of last year, was very, very fatal with, articulated vehicles having head-on collisions where we lost a number of individuals, including a policeman. And so we hope that this will be prioritized and the rehabilitation work will be done sooner rather than later. Again, we appeal to the Federal Control of Works and the Federal Roads Maintenance Agency to deploy men and material to the Kara expansion joint of the portion of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway for speedy rehabilitation to preserve lives and property. You may not know the life that you'll be saving once you deploy men and material for that rehabilitation work as soon as possible.
I mean, it's really very sad. I'm sure Jeff would have a few things to say. It's really very sad. We had thought that with the level of events on that bridge, something would have been done as soon as yesterday. There was an accident on that portion of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway only yesterday. Remember on Friday, our colleague couldn't even join us, Jeff, because on Friday it was a total shutdown as a result of multiple accidents on that axis. We spoke with Engineer Richard Adeleye yesterday, who was supposed to join us on the program, but all of a sudden he opted out. I'm not sure exactly what the communication line is between the Ogun State Ministry of Works and the FRC, because the FRC put out a statement just this morning informing Nigerians to plan ahead of that rehabilitation work, only for the Ministry of Works to put out a statement saying, you know what, we are putting that work on hold. Jeff?
Well, it speaks to the issue of coordination. I think the road is clear enough to know that it's an important road. These kind of situations should be envisaged. This is not the last time it's going to happen. So what is the plan? Because sometimes it's just about poor planning. That's the truth. It's one of the busiest, perhaps the busiest road in Nigeria. It's like the Trans-Niger pipeline in the Niger Delta. This is what the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway represents. So because of the traffic load, the workload these bridges have to carry and this entire stretch, we should be envisaging things like this to happen intermittently, because wear and tear will happen over time. To see that there's no proactive measure to say, when this happens, what do we do? It's very worrying. We hope that the ministry will do something as quickly as possible. But guys, let's move from there within the time we have. We've talked about government not being able to be clear on some of the things. For instance, let's go back to the NDDC probe. What has happened with that probe? Remember, Godswill Akpabio then was Minister of Niger Delta. The famous Minister of Your Mic, what came out of that in terms of the results? And then we now had the issue of the humanitarian ministry from the previous one to the era of Better I Do. Now the lady who was in charge of the NSIP has been speaking, Halima Shehu. I think she granted an interview. She said she actually, had blown the whistle about some expenses that were suspicious, fraudulent as alleged. But instead of her to be commended, she was reprimanded, or she was getting reprisal. Those are her words. And then she's saying that the records are with the EFCC. The EFCC should publish the record because reputational damage has been done to her. So we don't know who is telling the truth between her and the former minister, Better I Do. So I think it is in the interest of Nigeria and the interest of these individuals who are involved for the EFCC or the government to publish this report. Did they steal our money? Didn't they steal our money? So that we're clear. And let's be clear on exactly what happened to the monies in this ministry. So it's very disturbing. Now we're having the issue of the fictitious, as they say, government agency. So we cannot continue like this. Did this lady do anything wrong? Was there fraud committed or not? Let's know. So now they are coming out to say, I have done, Halima is coming out to, Miss Halima is coming out to say, I did my part in presenting what I should present. Maybe the other person should also present hers. I'm talking about Better I Do in this case. But all of these documents are with the EFCC. So when are we going to get a proper report? We can't continue like this. So if they are not guilty, they are clear. If they are guilty, the Lord knows how to take his course. But there must be proper, believable, accurate explanation as to what happened to these monies and the approval procedure and accounting procedure, what was right and what was wrong. Guys.
Well, indeed, it's not just about what she's saying, but about, the facts of the matter. It's about diligent investigation by the EFCC to prove who's guilty, to prove who's not guilty. It's about the records of the accounts of the NSIPA, the Social Investment Promotion Agency, I believe. It's about, what transfers were made. So we can't take her word for it until investigations have been done. And I'm wondering why she's speaking now, months after EFCC had made these allegations. I can't quite remember if there were arrest warrants issued, and not very much was known about whether this investigation was doing or not. And Jeffrey, you have always pointed out the need for us to have clarity on the nature of allegations made against the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Betta Edu, because it really isn't good for her political career if there is no clear determination of her case, such that we can know what really transpired at that particular ministry. So if she's saying that she blew the whistle on, this corruption allegations, then let the courts decide the facts of the matter and who is liable to prosecution, trial, and jail. Because if the collective Commonwealth of Nigerians have been siphoned or embezzled in any way, then the EFCC should go after the culprits.
We are totally out of time. We have to leave it here. Nigerians are watching, Mr. President, so do not forget that. That's the show, everyone. I'm Kenny Egiga. Sunrise Daily is up next.
We're back again tomorrow for the midweek edition. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Jeffrey Ozama. Bye-bye.